Join us as we discuss Silent Hill on the next episode of the Time Hop Podcast. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Time Hop Podcast. I'm your host, David Lozada. I'm joined with Tim Ronan.
Hello.
And special guests, Steve and Toby from the Pixel Meditations Podcast. Hi, guys.
Hey,
David,
what's up?
Thanks for having us on your show, man.
Of course. So, seeing as this is your first time on the Time Hop Podcast, I'm going to give you some time to introduce yourselves. Steve, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, I'm a fellow writer on KeenGamer.com alongside David and Tim. I'm not sure. Are you a writer on King Gamer as well?
Yeah, I think we're all. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few fellow King Gamer writers here. On top of that, I play a lot of games myself. I like platformers and RPGs. I've been playing since I was a kid, like probably most listeners. And Toby and I run a podcast of our own called the Pixel Meditations, where we try to talk about varying topics within gaming through kind of an intellectual or serious mindset, treating gaming as an art form and something that should be appreciated beyond just simple entertainment. So yeah, that's sort of my background.
Very cool. And Toby?
So my name is Toby, and like Steve said, we do the Pixel Meditations, and our focus for the podcast, like Steve said, is just to kind of like treat video games a little bit differently than I think popular culture has sort of typically treated them. So, I mean, we like to appreciate video games from, I don't know, maybe like more of like an artistic point of view, or in like maybe like an intellectual point of view. We cover a lot of different games and just genres and developers and sort of what motivates people to make games. And yeah, we kind of like to bring a little bit of a different angle towards kind of like games in general.
Very cool. Yeah, I've listened to your stuff before, and I like the wider range of topics you guys choose from, and you really go nitty gritty. Like I heard one on streaming and what was it, cloud services. That one was really interesting. I really liked hearing that one. I definitely recommend checking them out. Pixel Meditations. You could find you guys on Spotify, iTunes, I think, right, and Google Play.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much all the major places that you get your podcasts were there.
Yep. So go check them out. As soon as you're done listening to this, check them out. Okay, so moving on to the topic of the show. This week we're going to talk about Silent Hill, originally released for the PlayStation 1 on January 31st. 1999, very strangely released here in North America despite being a Japanese game. Released here in North America first, then it released in Japan a couple months later, I believe in April or March, and Europe about a month later too. It stars a everyman as opposed to like other horror games like Resident Evil where they have combat training, and it tells the story of a man named Harry Mason who's on the hunt for his missing adopted daughter, and then he gets kind of involved with a cult, and all these strange things happen, and it's very bloody and scary, and it's a very interesting game. So let's start talking about it. First off, what do you guys think of the presentation? Steve, let's start with you. What do you think of Silent Hill's presentation?
The presentation's actually pretty incredible. I mean, they were dealing with a lot of limitations on the original PlayStation, and I guess despite those limitations, they did a fantastic job with creating a very, very spooky and claustrophobic atmosphere. I mean, when you have all the snow falling down, and I felt like for me, the presentation, the part that I liked the most was it felt like you never had full visibility in the game. Like, my favorite part of the game was when you're in the hospital basement. Definitely the scariest part of the game, in my opinion. And it felt like there was just constantly like black spots on your screen where you couldn't see, and you just never get. And you always want to see more, but it always just sucks you in the atmosphere by cutting off your visibility and making you feel a sense of kind of claustrophobia in this kind of harrowing world.
Yeah, I definitely got that too. Toby, what about you? What did you think of it?
I mean, I think I it's definitely pretty spooky. It's interesting because like Steve said, like it was dealing with a lot of hardware limitations at the time. Kind of like the tank movement system that you have going, you know, where like you have to push kind of like the upper arrow to move forward regardless of like kind of like the direction of the character, kind of like a lot of Resident Evil games and like kind of like a lot of games of that era. It just creates this like kind of like interesting way of moving around. And yeah, like I thought the how it's like snowing and there's a lot of fog used very like liberally throughout the whole game, and the atmospheric music, it's just like it feels very spooky. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. And I really didn't play this game until recently, but like I've been drawn towards Silent Hill for many years just because of its kind of like position as one of the most important kind of like early psychological horror games. And yeah, like it's really cool to play, and I think it holds up to some extent even now in like the present era.
Oh yeah, I totally agree, especially since we have so few like survival horror games nowadays. I mean, we had Resident Evil 7, right? And Resident Evil 2 remake is coming out, but those are both Resident Evil games, right? And Outlast is another one, but still very few in terms of very worthwhile survivor horror games. Dead Space was one of the last great series in that genre. Definitely agree with you guys in the sense that it is very effective in giving us that kind of horror vibe without really putting a lot of spectacle in front of us, right? Like it isn't as I don't know, in your face as Resident Evil, because they have like, I know Resident Evil 2 had like zombie dogs and obviously there are zombies and a lot of blood and gore and stuff like that. But it does well without putting too much there. And actually, it's funny that you guys brought up the fog, because Konami purposefully put that fog in so that it could obscure kind of the graphics of the game. So it was kind of a device used to kind of make it more visually appealing, kind of reduce the jagged lines and the polygonal ugliness that usually comes with PlayStation 1 games. So that was kind of also it served the artistic purpose, but it was also a practical design purpose. So I thought that was very cool how they kind of killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah, I feel like it works really effectively as well. Like I don't know, like also a lot of the all of the PlayStation 1 games, because they're working with like a CRT setup, they have these like scan lines as well. And I feel like just that package with the scan lines and the fog and the the snow, like it makes it like even more creepy somehow, even though they're dealing with like significant hardware limitations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like the history of this game is so strange and also very kind of interesting, because it was originally supposed to be like a Hollywood type movie, like in the vein of like Uncharted series or something like a AAA game by Konami. And then they went on a different direction because Konami put like a team of very inexperienced, not inexperienced, but they had made a game previously that was a dud. And so they put all these people, like all of these team members, all into one group called Team Silent, and they made them make a game. And they said you have to deliver a really good game, or maybe like I don't know. This is hearsay, but maybe their jobs were going to be in jeopardy. That part is hearsay, but they did put them all in one group together, and they taxed them with making this like amazing game, and they came out with this. So it's like really interesting to see. I mean, I would think that if you're making a AAA game, for that time, you'd make something much more positive, much more lighthearted. But they made something like this, and they probably took it from like Resident Evil, took a cue from Resident Evil, and wanted it to kind of share in that popularity. But still, it's a little jarring to see that. Yeah, I mean, that's basically wraps up my impressions of the presentation too. It still holds up today because it's so, you know, dull and it really kind of taps into your senses too because you see so little. And like with the enemies that you do see, like they just kind of pop out at you because like they're like the children themselves, the graveyard children. Did you guys get up to that part where you were facing them?
Yeah, I did, and yeah, it's pretty freaky, man. They're just like grabbing you on your feet and stuff, and you can't really identify exactly what they are. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is partially maybe the hardware limitations, but it's just like all the enemies in this game have sort of this. They're kind of featureless. Like you do have like nurses, and you have like zombie children. I don't know if they're not really zombies, but children and flying creatures. I don't know the technical terms for these enemies' names, but they're all kind of like faceless in a sort of way, and it makes it all the more harrowing because they're not identifiable. They're sort of something that comes out of a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah, and you can kind of project your own nightmares into it almost, kind of like how no, I like how like anime characters are like very generic looking, like a lot of protagonists, right? But they're made, especially I'm talking like Japanese, you know, like characters. A lot of them are purposely made a little more generic looking, right? Because they want viewers to kind of project themselves into the characters, right? So like Harry Mason himself, that was exactly the mindset into designing his character. But I wonder if like they approach that like the enemies with the same mindset, like they wanted people to project their own kind of nightmares into these characters. In any case, it is yeah very scary. The graveyard children themselves were particularly I I think they're called something completely different, but colloquially they're known as the graveyard children because well they're in a school, right? And they they were like originally designed to look more like children, but they had to be reworked twice for North America, and for Europe they had to be reworked four times. So yeah, yeah,
Wow.
because you would shoot them and you'd like hit them with a pole and you know like all these other stuff or whatever you had in your arsenal. So like you're killing children basically, and obviously that was a no-no for North America and Europe. So very cool stuff. The presentation here is really top notch.
I guess one thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is the fact that this game is completely fully 3D. Like this is considered one of the first 3D survival horror games because Resident Evil used pre-rendered graphics, unlike Silent Hill. So this game has sort of a different aesthetic than the Resident Evil games did at that time.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, if
So
you go back and you play like Resident Evil 2, you'll definitely notice the graphics or the backgrounds are all pre-rendered, where Silent Hill everything's definitely done. It's built from ground up to be like a fully 3D engine.
that's right. I never even thought about that because to my mind the distinction never made itself very apparent because I had never played. I don't know because I hadn't played Resident Evil in a long time, nor do I even remember. I remember what it looks like, but side by side, like in my mind, side by side, they look the same, kind of. So like they were using the same graphics. So that's very cool. That's a very cool distinction. So do you think that aids in kind of capturing this type of atmosphere and the fact that it's all rendered that way?
I personally thought it did, yeah, because like I said, there's no real visibility in this game, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the pre-rendered backgrounds look a little blurrier, especially by modern standards. So when I replay Silent Hill, even though some of the surfaces might be kind of monochrome or a little bland, I think that they look a little more realistic than the pre-rendered stuff does.
Mm-hmm.
And with the lack of visibility, all these like terrible like I don't know how to I guess like rusty colors and gray drab colors, all of them sort of come to life more than I think the original Resident Evil games do for me.
I totally agree with that because if you play like the pre-rendered games like in like I don't know 2018 like even games like Final Fantasy 7 like you can like the backgrounds just look like like utter trash now like but like with but like with games like Silent Hill especially with like emulators you can like increase the resolution through the software like up to like 6 times so like you get like really like a high res image out of it because it's like rendering it like through the software and
Mm-hmm.
it's not like a pre-rendered image that can't be like blown up. So I mean, I think it looks really great actually because of that.
Wow, really cool. No, I had never, I again like I've never like conception like I never had that distinction in my mind because I'd always put them all in the same group, right? With the pre-rendered, right? Backgrounds and environments. So like now that I see that distinction, I can definitely see how like Silent Hill would look so much better in the modern day with emulators because you can't really do much with those static kind of right 2D backgrounds. So
yeah, they're kind of stuck, and there's nothing you can really do. It's really difficult to like make a game like Final Fantasy VII like more beautiful, whatever.
exactly, you would have to like somehow rearrange those assets and kind of do it separately in my mind, right? And
Yeah.
whereas in a game like Silent Hill, it's all the same, right? So that would work way better.
I wouldn't have known that unless I had done a little bit of research into the background of the game. Because, I mean, it's been a long time for me since I played a lot of those original Resident Evil games on the PlayStation. So it's definitely not something I noticed when I was playing these games originally.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the same impression I had because like I mean I admit it like I kind of grouped them all in the same manner. I didn't really look at the distinction. I didn't look at it that way because I played these games originally when I was a kid. So back then, as you just said, like you don't really notice these things, and then when you look at it back today, it's much more noticeable. Very cool stuff. So moving on to Silent Hill's gameplay, what did you guys think of that? Steve, let's start with you.
Now, I don't like the control setup with the tank controls. That's probably my biggest issue with games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. I really just don't like the tank control scheme. I understand that's a limitation of the time. Maybe there wasn't as much of a standardization of analog sticks, and maybe there wasn't an easier way to make the control schemes. Now, if I remember right, I think Dino Crisis 2, which was an awesome shooter for the PlayStation, kind of fixed this, but that was a later PlayStation game. But Silent Hill and the Resident Evil games definitely have the tank control scheme, which I personally do not like at all. I don't know how you guys feel about that personally, but that's my biggest complaint about Silent Hill.
Yeah, I'm not very fond of tank controls either. Toby, what did you think?
So I mean, I thought it's kind of frustrating a little bit for me, but I don't know, like eventually I just kind of get used to it and I feel comfortable with it. Honestly, the biggest thing for me, and I know you can go into the settings and change it, but like having the map be, I think like the triangle button, so like I felt like I was always hitting that button.
Oh yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, and then like and you go into it and it's like you can't just like quickly switch out of it. You're like, it's kind of annoying. And then also the inventory menu is the select button, which is a little bit of a strange choice. Like they could have just like switched the map and the select button, and it would have been kind of like a more standard control. Like the triangle button could have been your inventory, which is more important than like the map a lot of the times. And then also it's a bit weird. I mean, it's not necessarily terrible, but your health is like kind of obscured, and like you have to go into the menu to see if you're about to die. It's kind of a little frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Although I did hear that the DualShock version, or like, okay, so like if you play Silent Hill with the DualShock controller, so like the one with the joysticks and not the original controller, you can actually get like a heartbeat feedback that like tells you kind of like your current life situation. I don't know. I didn't play it with that controller, so I didn't get that experience. But that's just what I heard.
Is that the rumble feature or?
Yeah.
Oh,
like there's a
very
rumble.
cool.
There's a rumble feature that has like kind of like a heartbeat. So that seems pretty cool. They did think about that, and that's kind of cool if they added it.
That's super immersive. Tim, what did you think of the gameplay?
Just kind of looking at it, I'm wondering if it's like, does it ever get weird to aim at things or hit things? I feel like that might be a problem sometimes.
Well, I remember playing the game myself, and I definitely encountered that. I don't know, you guys, did it ever get weird for you with aiming?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of like auto aims a little bit, but at the same time, like not.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
It's semi-functional. It is. I mean, especially enemies that are flying around, and there is sort of an auto aim feature where if your body is facing the direction of the enemy, you can generally hit it. but it's not always clear cut whether you're going to hit the enemy. And with the shooting mechanic, that's definitely kind of frustrating. I found the melee combat a little bit easier and more straightforward.
Sometimes I find the melee, like, sometimes it hits, sometimes it wouldn't, actually. Like, with the gun, I found the opposite, actually. Like, with the guns, like, they would usually hit, but, like, with the pistols, but, like, with, like, the pipe I had, I think, this was a while ago, but I would try to hit some enemies, and like, it wouldn't connect, and then sometimes it would. I don't know why that would happen, but that was kind of a little weird to me. Maybe because the hitboxes were a little off, or something of that nature. But especially like the smaller ones, like the Graveyard Children, like I mentioned before. The bigger ones weren't as much of a problem, but the small ones were strange. Yeah, I feel like the gameplay is it's a little awkward to play today, just because those tank controls are, once you do get used to them, it isn't that big of a deal. Like, I mean, it's still a big of a deal because there's a delay, right? You have to, Toby, I think you mentioned before, you have to press in the direction you want to go, right? And then you'd move in that direction. Like, you have to press up constantly, and then you'd move. But like, I find that people would look at that and they'd be very annoyed at it, because you're not directly moving in that direction, like, right away. Especially in more like heated moments where you're being ganged up with a bunch of, enemies, and you just want to run out of the way, or like you're in a corridor, or what have you. I find those moments a little more annoying, because you can't get out of them as fast as you'd hope. But that being said, you do get used to it, and it isn't as bad. Like, once you're in the thick of things, like once you really pick up the controller and you've been doing it for a while. I don't know, did you guys get that impression? Did it become less of an annoyance once you started playing it more?
Yeah, for me, I definitely got used to it pretty quickly. I mean, I don't think it's that problematic, because I feel like the game isn't really it's not really the type of game where, like, there's a lot of really quick action that's required. Like, you're kind of like slowly walking around the city for most of the game, or just kind of running through, like, you're not trying to, like, quickly perform a lot of different actions. So I think it sort of works. I think it's fine.
I would second that. I think the same thing. I think maybe if you play for about 20-30 minutes, you'll be fairly used to the controls. A game like Tomb Raider is so much more offensive, because you were jumping around, you had to grab platforms, shoot enemies, and it was supposed to be a much faster experience. And that game had terrible, I believe they were tank controls. If not, there was something that was very similar. But terrible. I found Silent Hill, Tomb Raider is pretty much unplayable to me, the original ones. But Silent Hill, like Toby said, usually you're kind of facing one enemy itself can be pretty hard to take out. You're usually facing one or two enemies at the most. There wasn't many parts where you need to face multiple enemies, but I might also be forgetting some parts of the game that I haven't seen in 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that come to mind were in those closed corridors. I think it's later in the game. Like, I keep coming up with the children, but the children, like, they come up to you. Like, there's like 2 or 3 at the same time. Those are the ones that come to mind. But yeah, for the most part, there aren't a lot that gang up on you. Like, I remember that part especially. Like, I was really like, could you leave me alone? Because I'm like, I was new to the controls, right, at that point. But like, I was like, I just want to not have to deal with this and just run away, because I don't know why in particular I had such a frustrating time at that moment, but probably because I hadn't played the game in a while and I had come back. But when I had come back and I had to face that moment, I was particularly frustrated with the controls. But like you guys said, I mean, I think if anything, the controls help immerse the players a little better, because it's a little more deliberate, right? And because the game is so atmospheric, everything feels a little more deliberate just as a whole. So like, every move that you take, it feels like it's calculated, and it feels like it has to be calculated, but not in a way that it's like annoying, or not in the way that it's very obtrusive. I feel like it just aids in the experience overall. Yeah, so I think the gameplay helps. In modernity, I feel like players would complain about it. Like, if Konami, miraculously had a change of heart and would make a Silent Hill remake, and they'd include tank controls, I think people would not like just tank controls, straight up tank controls. I think people would have a problem with that. What do you guys think? Would yeah? You think so?
I feel like tank controls kind of died in that era of gaming. We've kind of moved on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel the
plus
same.
You see the Resident Evil remakes and what Capcom did with the Resident Evil 1, 2, and not 3, but the 1 and 2 and 0 remakes is they gave you the option for classic controls or modern controls, which I thought was really cool. I mean, I went to modern controls because I think they're much better, but if they left you that option, like, okay, if you really want that classic Resident Evil experience, like, you can choose the tank controls. They're still there.
Yeah, I feel like Konami would benefit a lot from giving people those two options, because it would tap into the nostalgia of a lot of people, but it'd also be open for a lot of new audiences. Because I have a lot of friends who are really big Resident Evil fans, and they said that they would play the game, like the remake that came out 2015, or the first Resident Evil remake. Don't remember. I mean the second one, the HD one. Don't remember when that came out, but it came out this generation, and a lot of people were really happy that a lot of diehard Resident Evil fans were really happy that they had those two options, because it was a nice throwback, and they would play it twice because of that. So it was really cool. So moving on to the sound design of Silent Hill, what did you guys think of that? Steve, what did you think?
Oh, the music in the game is absolutely terrifying. I think I had sent Toby the.
Yeah.
I think before we were on the podcast, I had sent him the soundtrack, and I was like, "Don't listen to this. Like while you're really typing up, while you're reading information, it's absolutely terrifying." The game doesn't really have music. It has an intro song and a couple songs at the end, but the game is literally just these terrifying, shriek industrial noises as you're playing through the game, and they really are. They're frightening. They really do they stick to the environment. They frighten me anyway, and it's pretty hard to frighten.
Right. Toby, what did you think?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's very atmospheric, and then there's like these interesting, like almost like rock tunes, or I don't know what it is. Like it's kind of, I think it's quite diverse in the kind of like the music throughout the game. Like there's a few kind of more melodic themes, but mostly just kind of like that industrial atmospheric sounds, which are pretty great. I mean, I feel like it is like kind of revolutionary in that sense, because I think at the time, like especially like in the late 90s, like there weren't a lot of games exploring like atmospheric music like this, and especially in a horror themed game. Like I guess there was like Resident Evil, but it kind of just like carries that mantle, and it kind of like further explores kind of the creepy music.
It wasn't afraid. I think that's one of the best parts about this game, is that it's not afraid to take a lot of risks, and you could see that definitely in the sound design, because Steve, as you mentioned before, like it's so minimal, right? But that aids in the experience so much. Tim, what did you think of the sound design of the game?
I personally tend to avoid horror games. And to that effect, I have not listened to the soundtrack myself, but just based on, I mean, both what you guys are saying, and based on the just classic nature of people loving this game, I can assume that it is probably not very pleasant to listen to.
That's for sure. No, but I mean it is pleasant when like it's really weird. Like if you're a sadistic person, like, or you just like you just like torturing yourself. It does help.
Don't we all?
Yeah, right. I mean, love it. No, but if you're that type of person who loves being kind of immersed in the experience, like you won't mind kind of the music of the game. Like it would just help you immerse you a little more. Like it's like a necessary part to Silent Hill as a whole, in my opinion. One of the particular aspects of the sound design that we didn't talk about were the enemies. Like some of them are really like freaking, like the screeching noises that they make are really like nightmarish, and they're really traumatizing.
Is this where Pyramid Head comes from?
The
No,
second game.
that's the second
Silent
one.
Hill 2.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, some of them are really scary. Like, there are some moments where you're outside. I think it has to do with the radio, and that's another. I think that's the whole other aspect of it. The radio, sometimes you hear that static, right? And it's really loud static, and it'll warn you. Forgive me if I don't misremember this, but it'll warn you if like there are enemies nearby, right?
Yeah. That's kind of I think that's the point generally of the
Radio. Yeah, and like sometimes I think it'd grow louder when there's an enemy nearby. So like I remember there's one part where I'm outside, like in front of a church or something, and like it was really like loud static, and I was like, oh my god. So I just did a 180 and I just went back inside that church or whatever, and it was scary stuff, you know, like it sticks with you, and you're always kind of from then on I was always kind of paying attention to the radio and making sure that some weird stuff wasn't going to happen, some screeching wasn't going to happen.
Well, I have a question actually here.
Sure.
Because I was replaying this a couple days ago, and I kept hearing this siren sound in certain parts of the overworld. I guess the overworld map of the city. Like I was running around and I hear this siren. It was sort of as I went away from it, it would disappear. Was that the radio or was that something else? I'm not sure if anyone can confirm that or not.
A siren. Toby.
Yeah. I kind of recall that in my playthrough recently. Yeah, like there's definitely like this kind of like ooh, like sound in the background that kind of sounds like an ambulance siren or like maybe like an air raid siren or something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty frightening. I just searched for it and I was like, I don't know if I want to find it anyway, but I'm just wondering what the heck it is.
At what part in the game was it in?
It's when you're exploring the streets outside. I know, like, the first moment you've got to go to the doghouse and you're trying to get to the school, you hear it in a few different places in the city on the streets.
I don't know. Maybe it was like some kind of, I don't know. Was it hinting at maybe like the nurses later on? No, I don't think that would have made sense, right? Because that wouldn't make any sense in the timeline, right? I don't know. That's strange. That's really cool, though.
An answer to that question.
That's really cool, though. I mean, that's really creepy. Like,
yeah, it's really creepy.
Like hearing that, just you know, you're just taking a stroll inside the hill and you hear these things. No, that really, again, I mean, that all comes together and it really helps with the immersion. So, moving on to lasting appeal, would you say this game is worth playing today? Steve, is it worth playing today?
Yes, but maybe not for everybody. I think that you have to sort of be able to appreciate older games. I think that the gameplay still holds up pretty well. It's definitely still creepy, and the atmosphere is 100% intact. I don't think the visuals are very disappointing, considering it's a PlayStation 1 game. I think it's mostly the controls, and it's sort of just it's got some dated mechanics. But I think that survival horror, if you're used to playing old games and you're open-minded enough to realize that you're going to be playing sort of something that's flawed by modern standards, absolutely, it's definitely still worth playing.
I definitely agree. It's a classic and kind of like a game that's really influential for kind of like the late PlayStation era. And I think if you're curious about games that are kind of like survival horror themed, and there, like you said, there's not that many of them out there. I mean, I think you should definitely give Silent Hill a look. I think it's really interesting. The history and kind of like the development of it was kind of unique. I think even in the kind of like the world of Konami, like through my research, I kind of like stumbled across kind of like the fact that it was somewhat of like a black sheep project. Like it was just thrown to the misfits to kind of like put together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a game that's like quite popular, maybe in spite of Konami and not because of Konami. If that makes sense. Like
yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Like I think it is successful, and Konami created an environment to like make developers produce it or whatever. But I feel like there was a lot of unique kind of creative individuals who kind of took it upon themselves to kind of like add in some like kind of really fun, interesting things they wanted to explore. Like I think it's always really interesting when kind of like Japanese developers produce games that are like very kind of immersed in like Americana. So, you know, they're not Americans, but they're totally into like American towns and like, I don't know, like just like Stephen King influence and creepy stuff like that, like zombies and creepy stuff like that. And like it's just cool to see something that they make. And that's just like, I think that's really interesting to play a game like that. And yeah, absolutely. I think everybody should give Silent Hill you know, a try.
You know, it's funny your last point about like Japanese developers doing something on Americana. What came to mind immediately was Swery65. Do you know that developer?
Oh, I don't actually.
He did like Deadly Premonition, some other really weird games like D4, Dark Dreams Don't Die. He's done
that's right.
He's done only like a handful of games, but they're always about like Americana, and he's a very Japanese. I mean, he's Japanese, but he, you know, his background is very like JRPG heavy kind of games. So like it's really cool how he transitioned into this kind of Western mindset, and like all of his games have some kind of Twin Peaks reference to them. So it's just really cool. And you're right. I think like that whole, I think it was also a challenge for them, like because from what I recall, one of the developers on the game, I think his name was Hiroshi Sato. He was one of these people that was like a misfit, as you said, that Konami deemed a misfit. And he said that when he was doing like the FMVs for the game, which we didn't talk about, which are really great, like they're really good. The full motion videos for this game, they're really great. I feel like
compared to other stuff at the time, definitely.
Oh yeah, like I feel like those.
I guess that. But I think that one guy like made all of them by himself. Like he didn't have any help.
Yeah, he said there was one video I saw that it was he lived in the studio for 2 or 3 years. Seriously, like he lived in the studio for 2 or 3 years, and like he would wait for the development team to go home, and then he just continued the FMVs. It was really really interesting.
Apparently he needed to like use their computers or something like that.
Exactly.
Like, he had to have like all the computers, and he just did it by himself.
All the computers.
Yeah. He had
all of them.
He had to use. I think it was like 130 computers. Seriously, he had to use 130 computers to render all of these like videos at once. It was crazy. I don't even know how why you would need to do that, but but it's really cool. Steve,
he's an interesting character in the lore of this game because. Yeah, he's someone who basically Konami, from what we read, was that they wanted to give him a supervisor because he was not an older person in their company. He didn't have senior status, and so they were kind of trying to take credit to some extent for his work, but he didn't want a supervisor. So he said, "Okay, I'll do this all by myself. Like, you just give me the time, I'll do it." And he sort of worked like a slave to get these FMVs done and kind of solidify his status in the company, which is sort of like bittersweet, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking like. The video I saw had comments like, "Oh, Konami was bad back then; they're still bad now." That's not something that like I'm trying to point out here. It's just it's more like how this one guy was just so dedicated to Silent Hill, and he really poured his life into it to the point where I think he even threatened Konami. He said, "If you don't give me like my proper credit, I'm just not gonna give you like my technical knowledge, and I'm not gonna help the development team with this game." Right? I think that was an aspect of it.
Because I think so. At the beginning, they put him on kind of like more menial tasks, like not like a major aspect of the development, but he wanted to do the character designs, I think, and I think he just wasn't senior enough, but he had a lot of the technical know-how how to do that. And he sort of like dangled it in front of them, and they were like, "If you don't let me do the character designs for this game, I'm not going to share my knowledge with the staff, and you guys are going to figure it out on your own." So he almost like blackmailed them into basically making him the lead character designer. That's
right. I had to do the character design. Yeah, it's really kind of I don't know. The politics behind it are so interesting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable to some extent to me because of kind of like the seniority aspects of kind of Japanese culture in general. I think Konami adheres very strongly to like the seniority type of business. I mean, it's just my impression. I don't know for sure, but it just seems to like maybe be a bit of a struggle for kind of like new people within the company. So,
so this is totally off topic, but do you think that this internal seniority paradigm they have there, do you think it has anything to do with Kojima? And
we were like actually talking a little bit about that, and I kind of do think it is. I think Kojima just kind of wants to distance himself from Konami at this point, but I think early on maybe the seniority aspects were really influential because we're gonna release an episode on Metal Gear Solid like pretty soon, and we talked about how like Metal Gear Solid is just like Kojima's baby, like that's his, and I think just Konami just had this like these like octopus tentacles and kind of like I don't know, like they kind of maybe they're just too controlling over it, and I don't think Kojima really likes that. I think he wants to like kind of do his own thing because he's making his own game now and his own production, and he doesn't want to be involved in all that.
I think to some degree like he had free reign, not to totally derail this topic, but like I think to some degree he had like some free reign when it came to the Metal Gear franchises, as long as he had like as long as he was producing, right? Like I think that's what they care more about, unfortunately, which is true for most other publishers, right? It's true for Sony, it's true for Microsoft, it's true for everyone, for Activision especially. So like like it has to have some kind of return on investment, right? But at the same time, like he had a lot of creative liberties, and then maybe Konami wanted to step in and I don't know, mess around with that. But getting back to Silent Hill, like you could definitely see that they had creative liberties there, and maybe it had to do with their misplaced faith in the staff, because I mean, as I pointed out earlier, like they had to go through a lot of revisions to meet ethical guidelines for overseas, right? Stuff like that, and there are some moments in the game where it's like the sounds, especially like that are so creepy that it makes me kind of question how I even made it into the game, because they're so I don't know, like they're so like psychologically. If you're a little mentally ill, like I feel like this would affect you. No, seriously.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. This game was released in an era when like this genre wasn't present, so like parents bought this game for their children with no knowledge of what the heck was in there, and within the first 5 minutes of the game you're literally encountered with this, what is that, like crucified zombie thing, and then like you're freaking like destroyed by like all these creatures, and you have no idea what's going on, and it's like it seems like a game over, and then the game just continues. There's
a lot of like religious imagery we didn't talk about. Like there's like some religious imagery on this, and like there's cults and stuff like that. Like they're trying to resurrect a god, basically, right? Like that's the whole premise of the thing. Like it's this cult, and it's scary because if you look back at the time, we were just coming out of cults ourselves in the 90s, right? So like it's just so, I don't know, like it's almost like a dialogue on what America was facing at the time. like all of these different like we had Y2K. That was the era of Y2K too, right? So we had all of these these crazy people kind of pop out too, out of the woodwork for that. So it's just so cool, but at the same time, like they really got away with murder.
I think they absolutely did, and I don't. If the full extent of this was really like known to the public, I feel like it may not have really been what it was.
Right. Tim, what did you think of the game? Is it worth playing today?
I might not personally play it. As I mentioned, I tend to stray away from this genre in general. I don't know, maybe I'll check it out, but in terms of the wider population, it seems like at the very least it's worth checking out, considering it's led to further games in the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just seeing the roots of where something began.
Right.
Definitely seems like there could be hiccups along the way, just based on how certain aspects of the game were designed, and it was an earlier time and first entry and whatnot. But definitely worth a look, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, I like how you brought up the point of seeing where things began, right? And I think because of, as we were just talking, Toby, like, because this game pushes the envelope so much, like, it also lays the foundation for other games, like, I don't know, like Dead Space comes to mind, where it's so graphic, right? And it's so in your face about stuff, but I mean, Resident Evil to some degree is a lot like that too, but it also is very atmospheric, Dead Space, right? Like it also kind of has these moments where you're in space and you're very alone and you're in these corridors and like these necromorphs come out and they just kind of attack you out of nowhere, or like they're dead on the floor and like you would think that they won't come out and hurt you, but they do, right? And it's just these kind of little things that aid in the experience that really go a long way in this genre, because ultimately I think the survivor horror genre is mostly about the experience, right? Mostly about immersion, not so much about gameplay. Although I don't know. I feel like when survival horror, and you guys can jump in, let me know if I'm wrong here, but like when survival horror puts more emphasis on gameplay than story, like that's when it ends up being more action oriented, like something like Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 5. What do you guys think? Would you say that what's like the most important aspect to survivor horror? Is it gameplay, or is it story, or is it what aspect is most important?
For me, I think it's the atmosphere mixed with the gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, I find the plot in Silent Hill to be really convoluted. It's pretty hard for me to follow exactly what's going on, and I found that to be the case in a lot of the Silent Hill games. Not to say I didn't appreciate facets of the storyline, but I think for me it's a sense, like you talked about Dead Space, which is a series I really love, and Silent Hill is like the birth of psychological horror, which Dead Space continues beautifully. And I love that sort of setting where you don't know exactly what's going on. The atmosphere is really creepy. There's no like outside assistance to really help you. You're kind of just stuck alone in these places. There's an occasional side character. There's enemies there, but a lot of it is you just kind of stuck in your own headspace alongside this character who's trapped in this horrible world, and you trying to make tit for tat of what's actually happening. So I think atmosphere for me is probably what makes a great survival horror game.
Toby, do you think the same?
Yeah. I mean, atmosphere is so important, and I think atmosphere really contributes to like a great horror movie as well. So I think they're somewhat similar in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like I think it has to feel kind of scary, and I think having jump scares is a little bit bad. It's like similar to horror movies. Like you want like an actual feeling and experience of horror, and not necessarily just like monsters popping out. But I mean, some monsters popping out is okay, but not like the reliance of the horror experience.
Right. I feel like a lot of the horror genre across like movies and TV shows and even games, like they rely on spectacle a lot to kind of deliver on this horror promise, of scares. And when it relies on spectacle, it kind of ends up not being very, I don't know, worthwhile. Like for some reason, I don't know if you guys seen it, but there's this phenomenon in the United States called Bird Box, which is on Netflix. Do they have it by you? Did that movie come out?
Yeah, I've seen it on Netflix, or I haven't watched it, but it's available at least.
It's
I
Steve.
haven't heard of that one yet.
You haven't heard of it?
No.
It's basically like a phenomenon here in the States, and like I guess it's a horror movie because it's kind of like a quiet place where have people have to be quiet because like there are these aliens or something, and like people have to be quiet, or if they make a sound, the aliens come and they kill them. It's the same kind of premise in Bird Box, only if you see these enemies, they'll kill you. It's kind of like instead of hearing, you see them. But like when it relies so much on these little kind of, I don't know, it relies so much on the aliens where it doesn't even feel like it's scary anymore. It feels more like it's an action or like an action adventure type of movie rather than a horror one. I don't know. I feel like you don't know what it wants to be. Whereas something that relies more on atmosphere, that constantly goes back to like the ambiance, right, of the whole experience, that makes you feel more immersed in the horror genre, and it makes you feel like, yeah, this is like where I should be if you're a horror fan, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of like the mindset that games should go in going forward. Like, yeah, gameplay is always important, right? But atmosphere, I agree with you guys, is paramount to everything else.
And I would add also kind of like discovery is really important. So, did you ever play Amnesia: The Dark Descent?
I did. I played a couple hours, of the first one.
Yeah, so I think in that game you pretty much don't have any weapons at all, and you're just kind of like running away from this monster creature thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, I think having aspects of the game that are unknown, and then having some degree of discovery where you're running around like piecing together the plot, even if when you get the plot all put together it's still confusing and it doesn't completely make sense, but having like an unknown and exploring and just having discovery is really good, as well as with atmosphere.
Well, I mean, I think that's human psychology too, to an extent, right? It's just not knowing what's there is always so scary, right? That's why people like are so afraid of dying, because they don't know like what's going to happen after that, right? It goes with everything else, other things like public speaking, because they don't know what's going to happen after that. No one knows what people are going to think of them after that. So, yeah, I agree with you. Like, the fear of the unknown is probably humanity's biggest fear, right? So it's something.
Probably.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the horror genre, where the horror genre shines finest. All right, so that about wraps it up for our impressions of Silent Hill. Thanks for joining us. Next week we're going to talk about Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, which is a complete departure from the Silent Hill.
Lavender Town. I don't know.
Well, that is true, Lavender Town. Yeah. Oh man, do you guys know about the fable of Lavender Town, of how like these kids were presumably in Japan like committing suicide because of the music?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that?
Oh Jesus!
Is this a real life story, or is this something?
It's a fable. I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but supposedly there were these kids who they started hearing like the chiptune soundtrack of Lavender Town, and afterwards they get really sick, and within a week they just kill themselves, and it was like a mass suicide type of thing. It was really dark.
Man.
Yeah, for Pokemon.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
I'm sure they won't be including that in the next Pokemon game.
Now with more suicide. No. No, that's something I should not be joking about. But yeah, that'll be a next topic of the show. Thanks for joining us this week. Moving on to games we're playing next week. Steve, let's start with you. What are you going to play next week?
We've been doing a lot of stuff on Rare and Donkey Kong Country lately, so I've been replaying Donkey Kong Country 2 again. I can't get away from it. I've never beaten that game, finding all the coins, so it's something I kind of want to try. But outside of that, I've been playing an awesome racer called Horizon Chase, which just came out a few months back for most of the modern platforms. It's an arcade racer, and it's a lot of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Toby, what are you going to be playing next week?
Okay, so I recently, just as of yesterday, finished Metal Gear Solid 3. So I did like a full playthrough of that, which was really great. I'd never played that game. It's so amazing. It's really a classic and so fun, and it was really great. But I think I'm probably gonna play either finish BioShock 2 or start Transistor, which I got both of those. So I don't know. Those are two very different games, but probably one of those.
Transistor is really good. The soundtrack is really good. It's so
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And so
That's what Steve always tells me.
it's same.
It's one of my favorite games of this generation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's up there for me too. It's really like it's a tight experience too. Like it's not very long and it's very enjoyable throughout. The same with Metal Gear Solid 3. Not
Yeah.
not a short experience, but very memorable. I just did an article about what's his name? What's his face? Metal Gear Solid 3's the old man. What's his name?
Like Big
Ocelot?
Boss? Ocelot? No, Volgan?
No, not Vogan.
Old man.
The
Oh, the
old
sniper?
the sniper.
The end or whatever.
The end. Yeah. I just wrote about the end and how like he was such a cool enemy because you could take him out in so many different ways and it all kind of aided it in the experience, right? Like you
Oh
can,
yeah, I know that was a really interesting boss for sure.
yeah, like it's just a testament to Kojima's like his way of designing things. He's not afraid to take risks and he wasn't afraid to kind of say, "Hey, you can kill this guy if you want to." But you know,
You can just like wait for old age to kill him, right?
like
Really?
I think
I had no idea. I killed him in my playthrough. I didn't know you could wait.
Oh, really? So you actually fought him?
Yeah, I fought him. It was annoying.
He's hard, yeah. He's hard to fight like one-on-one like directly.
Yeah, well like every time I fought him, like I ended up being sent back to the prison, which is weird. I don't know if that happened to
Oh,
you.
yeah. That happens. Yeah. You'd go right back. Yeah.
It's like really annoying. It's really bizarre, but
I think
yeah,
it's
if you chase him around in the right way, eventually you can just kill him. But
I think it's kind of purposefully annoying almost because
yeah,
the game gives you like a lot of options to kill him like otherwise. And I don't know, like Tim just mentioned, like I think it's you wait a week, right? And if you wait a week, he
Something like
dies.
that.
He dies of old age. So
interesting.
and then
Like
there's
a week real time.
or you can just change it on your PS2 clock.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, or you could just do that.
Yeah, you could just change the time settings on your PS2 clock and then he'll die. Or like there's a moment before that where he's wheeled out, like because he's in a wheelchair, right? So he's like wheeled out, and he's like just looking at the forest for like a couple seconds, and you could just snipe him right there and you can kill him. That's the other moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of really weird spoilers in MGS3, or not spoilers, Easter eggs rather. Like, did you save when you're like locked up in that prison and then like get that weird dream?
Yeah.
What the heck was that? It's like
Kojima always throws like this really weird stuff. I think the weirdest was in Metal Gear Solid 2, like the end, like at the very end of Metal Gear Solid 2, all that weird stuff that kind of came at you. I mean, even 4 and 5 had a lot of weird moments. It's just I miss that guy.
yeah,
you know,
Kojima's a special dude.
Death Stranding will be out this year. I think so. Today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that game too. I mean, with all the imagery that we've seen so far, it looks so strange. But I'm really excited for it. It's just Kojima at his finest. You know, I'm really excited.
I wish I could comment more on Metal Gear Solid 3 because it was absolutely one of my favorite PS2 games at the time. But right now, it just feels like ancient memories I just can't quite tap into. It's been so long since I played it.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too. I actually played it on PS3 for the first time, the HD collection, because I played every game in the series but 3 for some reason. And when I went back and played it on the HD collection, I was really motivated to get all the trophies too, because at that time I was a really big trophy hunter. So like it was tough, man, because you had to get all the like one of the trophies was you had to get all the frogs too.
Oh my god.
And they're tough, dude. Those are tough to find. Like, they're like hidden because like it's all jungle environment, so like it's really hard to find them amongst all the leaves and the shrubbery and stuff like that. It's really, and some of them are really like far away and stuff. Yeah.
Dude, I love it in Metal Gear Solid 3. I really like the dynamics between Big Boss or Big Boss or Naked Snake and Eva. That was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
I really like it.
the game does a good job of like exploring like um, naked snakes or the bosses, the big. I don't
The
know
big
what to
boss.
call him anymore.
I
There's
don't
so
know,
many
just
like different names for him.
Yeah.
His relationships with like other women, like with the boss and like with Eva and like the series throughout like it does a lot of exploration of his female relationships, and I feel like that's somewhat interesting. Um,
For sure.
yeah. Tim, what are you going to be playing next week?
I'm not sure if I'll actually be playing too much, but if I did, it would probably be Minecraft.
Minecraft. Yes,
Yes.
that's great.
I have also been maybe having a hankering to play Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. So I
Oh,
don't know.
that's
I played
great.
that.
That's a good one. Are you going to do the HD one or the you're going to go to GameCube?
I just have the GameCube one.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha.
I have been
You can
wanting
never
to.
go wrong in any version of that game.
That's true. That's very true.
I've been watching a randomizer actually of that game online. I've been wanting to try that as well.
A randomizer.
So
Very cool.
yeah,
That
but
that that yeah.
ROMs are difficult to get your hands on these days.
Well, especially Nintendo ROMs, right? But no, I played the game first time with the HD remake, and oh my god, like I can't believe I missed out on it on GameCube because I had a GameCube too, and I never bought it. But what a great game!
Yeah. Wind Waker's definitely like my favorite. I think of those Zelda series.
Yeah, it's up there. It's up there with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask for me. I love it.
Yeah, it's so hard to choose, man. They're so all of them are so good.
Yeah.
The entire Zelda series, there's really hardly a bad game in there. I mean, I don't think Wind Waker is my top 3, but I definitely had a great time with it. It's a cool game that went in a kind of different direction, but it doesn't quite live up to like Breath of the Wild or like Ocarina of Time or A Link to the Past for
Dude,
me.
I don't know. Whatever.
Some tension here.
Yeah, this is one of those series that's always gonna like, get people riled up if you pick a favorite because there's so many great games. It's so hard to say which one's better than another one. It's always so subjective.
Oh yeah. Oh for sure. Yeah, I mean it all I think a lot of it has to do with which one you played first and nostalgia too. Because I know like some people they really love Twilight Princess, but that's like the newest generation, right? Like Gen Z people, they love Twilight Princess and they love like some people even love Skyward Sword, which is like okay.
Yeah,
But
I think Steven loves that game.
I'm
by the
guilty
way.
on that one. I do love Skyward.
oh
Sword.
yeah.
I just love
Definitely
the Wii Motion Plus controls were so great in that game. It made combat really fun, and I thought it had one of my favorite soundtracks in the series. I just thought it was such a beautiful game inside and out. It did go on too long. I thought it could have been 10 hours shorter, but I thought it was an amazing game.
The best parts to me of that game were the I mean the mechanically it was a little boring, but the I forgot what they're called, but when you're in this other like realm dimension and you have to get all the seeds together, right, and put them together, and I don't know, you'd craft something of some sort. Do you remember this where they're like ghosts following you and like spotlights?
I think I vaguely remember this part. I mean, it's been many years since I played Skyward Sword as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I love the graphical aesthetics. I like the return to the cell shading, and the controls are great. And the dungeons, like I thought Twilight Princess's dungeons were over the top, too long. It was like 4 hours in one dungeon, and I like that Skyward Sword toned it down a little bit. It was a couple hours in a dungeon, which felt a little more reasonable.
Mm-hmm. The time travel like that not the time travel, but where you could manipulate time and for the environment, right? I thought that was really interesting. Like with that one dungeon, man, I completely forgot all the names because it's been a while. But like you could manipulate like whether or not it had vegetation or not or something like that, right? Just such a cool game in general.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I
that
don't
game.
think it's my favorite in the series, but it did a lot right. Especially, it fixed a lot of the issues that I thought were present in Twilight Princess.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah, it really one of the games that excelled in some parts, maybe not in all of them, but it helps kind of give us Breath of the Wild, and that game's undeniably really great.
Absolutely.
So what I'm gonna be playing next week, I'm gonna be playing the Resident Evil 2 one-shot demo, the remake. I still haven't played it. I've been meaning to. Really interested to find out how scared I'm gonna be, especially given how I've completely immersed myself in Silent Hill for the past 24 hours or so, and I'm really excited for the game in general. So definitely gonna give that a shot, and then I might go back and play Kingdom Hearts 2 just in preparation for Kingdom Hearts 3. I feel like I should be playing another Kingdom Hearts game, like maybe, what is it, Dream Drop Distance or something like that. But I don't know. I want to go back to Kingdom Hearts 2 because have you guys had a chance to see Kingdom Hearts 3, or are you excited about it at all?
So I definitely am. I played the first one and part of the second one, but yeah, like just seeing the, I don't know, the trailer. Like I'm so excited for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, it looks great. Yeah,
it looks so great.
I feel like I'm cautiously optimistic about that game because I've played it and like it feels like a PS2 game, and I don't know, like I don't know, man. Like I don't like that aspect of it. I don't like when games like The Last Guardian or something like that, like they feel like mechanically they were designed a long time ago, and I like feeling it much more tight, much more ergonomic, kind of. I feel like that's how all games should be, but for some reason this game, when I played it like a year ago, that's how it played. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully it turns out well.
Yeah, we'll see. There's certainly the hype, so.
Yeah, the hype's there for sure. All right, so that about wraps it up for this episode of the Time Hop Podcast. Thank you so much, Steve and Toby, for joining us. So awesome, really awesome conversation about Silent Hill this week. Check them out on the Pixel Meditations when you get the chance. Really awesome podcast, very knowledgeable podcast. They're definitely worth every minute that you pour into them because they're great. They're great guys too. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks again, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Next week we'll talk about Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. So stay tuned for that. Thanks everyone. See you next week.